Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Richest Men in Town podcast. I'm Mike Freeman, and along with my good friend and co-host Tyler Gould, we're excited to welcome you to our little podcast project. Tyler and I are just a couple of middle-aged husbands and dads driven to live our best lives. We want to be better every day, so here we'll be sitting down with great people. Not famous people, but great people that we admire, to learn their secret to living the rich life. Probably not the rich life you're thinking of. Our guests come in humbled and surprised at the invitation and hopefully leave feeling proud and grateful, realizing just how good they really have it. So pull up a chair, stay a while, and raise a glass with us as we toast our guests to the richest men in town.
Mike Freeman, how are you tonight on another night for Richest Men in Town?
I'm rich, man. I'm rich. I got notes. I got a friend of yours pouring into us for a couple of hours. What's not to like about that?
Yeah, what's not to love? We had Brent House tonight, who is a friend of ours now. After spending a couple hours together, shared some things. We started off tonight talking about setbacks and comebacks, and man, we kind of traveled a pretty wide path tonight with Brent. What stood out to you?
I kind of love, so we humbly, Richest Men in Town is an art form, Tyler Gould.
Yeah,
and you know how that life mimics art kind of thing.
Yeah.
And tonight was real life.
Yeah.
Was setbacks, extraordinary, ordinary moments, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Little things, nothing crazy, rocket science, earth-shattering breaking news headline kind of thing, and it was beautiful, and it was there were some moments there, man, where we carry things from our life into sessions with our guest, and as we're having conversations with our guests, he starts touching on things that we carried into the space. I don't know how it works. Right? But we were having conversations about setbacks. We were having conversations about internal scripts that we, that run in our heads.
Yeah.
And those things.
Yeah. I really felt like tonight there was some things that I felt like I wanted to hear and I needed to hear, right? I love his lesson about what God's currency is versus what man's currency is, right? I thought that was powerful. He talks about his process in finding revelation.
Well, he shares a couple of experiences with revelation and how the pattern of answer, the response that he received was similar over time, right?
Yeah.
And how appropriate that pattern was about learning new things.
Yeah.
Because here he is now using those experiences, teaching us new things.
Yeah, and it's interesting to be talking to a scientist. He is a scientist by trade. Explain to us sort of how the process of revelation kind of mirrors the scientific method in his book, right? And I thought it was really interesting. So
yeah, and I love the growth too, right? He talks about like, I struggle sometimes with this, or I struggle sometimes with that, and then later on, he's giving us clear evidence that's, while it might be a struggle, it is something that he's learned to overcome or cope with, because he's giving us evidence to the contrary.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Like I struggle with this inadequacy, and now I'm going to take a risk and start a business.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was
like, okay, let's hold both of those at once,
Yeah. It was a lot of fun. I mean, and, we had this discussion early on about, setting up our comeback, and Brent coming into that conversation and talking about, I don't know, I just kind of plod along one step at a time,
But the ghosts of episode past are present in this, right?
Oh, for
Dave
sure.
Voigtlander's all over it.
Yeah.
Boris and Dave Hill
absolutely
is all over it, right?
Yeah.
And I love some of his references. We'll definitely include some of those things in the show notes, because I really think they add to the conversation.
Yeah,
so.
I agree. It was a fun night. So to our guests, take a moment, find the nuggets that you can pull out from the conversation with Brent, do something with those. Pass
And
those
doesn't
along.
have to be big, right?
Doesn't have to be big.
Extraordinary little thing.
Yeah.
Find something.
One of the things that's exactly how Brent describes himself, right? Extraordinarily ordinary. And I would make an argument against that all day long after spending tonight with him. But pull those nuggets out, do something with them, and enjoy your time with Brent House on The Richest Men in Town. I mean, because everything that you do, whether you're celebrating or whether you're mourning, right, is fraught with difficulties. I mean, I was talking to Quinn yesterday, and it's like he's super excited. He leaves tomorrow to go to Brazil, and yet at the same time, he's mourning the loss of his current mission president, and he's talking about the stress of the trip, and I'm like, all these things, man, that are hard and that are, things that you don't want to have as part of this, they're all attached to this good thing that's coming. Like, you can't have this good thing without these other things attached to it. So if the choice was presented to you, hey, would you do this thing, but you have to experience all these things. I mean, right? It's just the way it goes. It's the way it has to be. And there's no avoiding it, I mean, and it sucks because you're in it and you're like, heart's broken, life is, you feel like you're shaken to the core, but at the end of the day, that's the thing that's going to make the next thing that much more successful. And
so let me share this thought with you. So Powell's City of Books. I don't know if you've ever been to Powell's bookstore in Portland.
I have not been to Powell's.
Okay, I kind of had a crazy moment in Powell's, right?
Okay.
Probably millions of copies of books of every topic, every author, every genre. Like you can only imagine city blocks of books, right?
I like that. Yeah.
I walk away with a book, and I think it was in the town that night.
Yeah.
I think it was J.C. Elkins. Mentions the book I picked out of Powell's.
Nice, dude.
Right?
What was the book?
So Tim O'Brien, Things They Carried.
Okay.
So for Veterans Day, I started reading this, and it's Vietnam. And it's referring to the things they carried, right? The things the soldiers carried, mementos, weaponry, right? Just getting into like basically what it was like in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And out of nowhere, he gives this amazing truth that is so Richest Men in Town. And I want to link that to your thought you just shared about setbacks, right? So this is what he says. 43 years old, and the war occurred half a lifetime ago, and yet the remembering makes it now. And sometimes remembering will lead to a story which makes it forever. That's what stories are for. Stories are for joining the past to the future. Stories are for those late hours in the night when you can't remember how you got from where you were to where you are. Stories are for eternity. When memory is erased, when there is nothing to remember except the story. Now, for obvious reasons for the podcast, I am obsessed with people's stories now.
Yeah.
And I would actually say, if you were to put me on the show and say, hey, what does it mean to you to be considered the richest man in town? I would probably change my answer.
Yeah.
It would be the richness of stories. Right? I think a rich man has many stories to tell. And I think here's the crazy thing. The most important story for Tyler Gould, for Mike Freeman, for anyone, is the story of how you came to know Jesus as the Savior, in my mind. Isn't that crazy that that's probably the low point of the story? Like low point of your life is when you realized what Jesus Christ did for you. Yeah. Because it probably means you're in it, right?
Right.
You need some help and you need to get out. and nothing quelches that guilt or that shame. Nothing soothes like that balm of Gilead, right? That atonement, that atoning sacrifice of Jesus Christ. And so the very setback that the life deals you, or through your own choices you deal yourself, is the thing that unlocks the most important answer, the most important story.
Yeah. I think that's a powerful thought, man. Like, what's the comeback look like? I would love to be able to have that much clarity in the middle of
you don't.
that, right? Where you could say, okay, here it is. But what does a comeback look like from this moment right now? What does that look like? I kind of like that thought. I kind of want to pursue that a little bit, in some way, like thinking, and maybe there is a way to do that, because, I've been in the middle of things where I've let it maybe engulf me a little more than I should, or I wallow in that a little bit more than I should. I think maybe there's a way to be able to not step back, but just maybe stand up in the middle of it and say, all right, what does this look like from here? Like from here, not like, let me look back on that thing and see, gosh, what did I learn from that? That's powerful. I want to continue that, right? But maybe stand up in the middle and go, all right, from this moment, what does this thing do to propel me forward?
But that kind of goes into
question, that, right?
That kind of goes into that thing that we were talking about last week, where, that author on Medium gets in and she writes an article of like, never will I ever.
Yeah.
Like, okay, life has taught me, and I'm not making this mistake ever again.
Yeah. And, we talk about, and we've had guests who have profoundly illustrated the principle of leaning into the pain, or leaning into the lesson, right? And I think maybe that leaning into it is exactly that. It's exactly the question of, okay, what do I get out of this now? Like, what is this meant to teach? Or what does it look like moving forward, having felt what I've just felt, right?
But what's cool too is like, we talk about people play the game differently when people keep score.
Yeah.
You play the game differently when you have nothing to lose.
Yeah.
So when you're in this position of like, your heart's broken, now, like that idea of stand up in it.
Yeah.
And now pick up those broken pieces and live like you got nothing to lose, because what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Your heart going to break?
Right. Yeah.
Your heart's already broken.
I want to be able to look back on those moments and say, yeah, these were the powerful lessons taught. And these were the things the changes that were brought from that thing. But Mike Freeman, I want to be better about embracing that moment as a springboard in the moment. You know what I mean? I want to stand up in the moment and say, all right, what does this look like moving forward from here? Not 2 years removed from here. What did it look like? But from right now, what do I look like moving forward?
But like that's not going to happen without conversation. Like, I think you got to have somebody from the outside to step up and be like, hey, because all your daughter wants to do right now is probably crawl up under a blanket and turn on some Netflix and eat ice cream.
Yeah. And I think that, but I think it takes, right, it's time, right? But look, I can look at it from a guy that's 47 years old, right? And like I said, there's been times in my life where I've let it engulf me. I've wallowed in it probably longer than I should have wallowed in it, but with the benefit of 47 years of life and of experiences, I want to be now the guy that can stand up in it and say, okay, yeah, this is bad, but what is this going to do moving forward? What immediately think of what is the comeback from this?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a powerful thought, man. For me, it's invigorating, to be able to stand up in it, sort of face the monster head on and say, yeah, all right, you kicked my butt just now, but that's round one. Like, that's round one, man. I can lose one round. I'm going to win the fight, And so I think that there's some power there. Could I have done that at 21? No. Could I have done that at 31? No. Should I have been able to do that at 41? Probably, but I didn't. You know what I mean? And so here I am. And I think that, I'm hoping that, and quite honestly, to go back to your point about conversations, I don't think, no, not I don't think, I know that this idea that I talk about right now about standing up in it wouldn't be a thing without 80 episodes of people teaching me that lesson. You know what I mean? So to your point of having a voice or someone to talk to you, right, at that moment, I guess I'm lucky in that I've had 80 of those people in my head saying, hey, man,
I was thinking the other day, I would love to go back to school and I would love to go get a PhD. You know what my dissertation or my thesis would be about? I would love to study the science of momentum.
Yeah.
Like straight up, not physics, like
right.
Mama Mo sports comebacks and what happens.
Yeah,
right?
there's probably there's probably a lot of emotional intelligence studies attached to that, right?
Yeah, I'm thinking there's got to be like sports psychologists, right?
Yeah,
like you got to get into like what happened on that snowy day in New England.
Yeah, what allows you to turn a page and move on, and what right? What allows one person to turn the page and become better for it?
I think it has to do
stay in it.
As my armchair sports psychologist, I think it has to do with the idea of like, we have nothing to lose. Yeah. Right? You get to a point where you're playing tight. You can't make it work. The other team is rolling. And then you realize, dude, they're rolling. We got nothing to lose. And you play, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You figure things out. I would love to read a book on momentum. I would love to get into like, how is it that can roll people?
Yeah. And I think that's interesting. Yeah. I mean, that would be fascinating, man. I agree with you 100%. It'd be fascinating to know sort of what historic, whether it's events or historic conversations that have taken place in people's lives that put them in a position to rise or to shrink.
Yeah.
Right.
What happens in Boston?
Yeah.
Right. Boston is down 3-0.
The guy still, yeah. Right. Okay. Yeah. 100%.
And then you got the bloody sock, right? And the whole, and then,
Absolutely.
somebody goes from, I can't do anything right to I can't do anything wrong overnight.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. You think about that. I remember, just watching my kids play sports, and then those conversations of, well, we're down, so it's over, and I've always had that thought. I always tell them like, I'll spot you for and come back. You know what I mean? Like, that's where I'm at. I'll spot you for, and then I'll come back and beat you. But I love that idea of like, what's the psychology that puts someone in that position to climb on.
I mean, if that was a pill, right? You'd give it to your daughter right now and be like, hey, right? The whole world thinks you're down. Like the whole world thinks you're out. The whole world is expecting you to be moping, sitting in it for the next 6 months of your life. What if?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, if we could hand that out, we'd be handing it out left and right? You and I just stand on the street corner.
I just tell people all the time, right? I tell people in that situation, living well is the best revenge.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely, man. I totally
Want
agree.
to look like you got it together the next time you see that kid.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. 100%, man. Yeah. No matter what, but it's funny. And I do, like I said, I'm 47 years old. It's with the experiences in my life, I'm better prepared to stand up in it. You know what I mean? I put myself back in someone's shoes of that age when I was that age. No, I wasn't prepared to do that. And you know, so it just takes time. It takes time. But look, if nothing else, I think here's a point, Mike. You could be 21 years old, and if you listen to the people that we've had on this podcast, it's a masterclass in how to stand up and move forward. I mean, Dave Voigtlander saying this setback set up my comeback. I mean,
yeah. Well, hey, if you're 21 right now, pretend like, is it Derek Anderson, right? Hanging out in the garden with the graybeards, with the seniors, with senior citizens, right? So like, if you are young, tune into some folks that have been down the road a little bit and find that strength, because the principle is true.
yeah.
Right. You latch onto it, you grab onto it, and you apply it to your life. Great if you learned it through experience. Amazing if you didn't even have to experience it and you can learn it.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the beautiful thing, right? We've had some guests on this show that aren't far off from 21 that have been through some heavy stuff, probably heavier than you and I have been through, and so look, these, again, I'm going to go back to your point about the power of conversation. I mean, I think that if we did better to try to understand each other as a whole, I mean, we'd be far and away better off than where we are now, right?
Well, to that power of story,
yeah,
like you are in something, right? And whether it's a breakup, I mean, the whole country could use a comeback right now.
Yeah.
Right. Seriously, the whole world could use a haste. Where you're at, stand up.
Yeah.
Right. Dust, you got some dirt on your shoulder. Let me get it off for you and get it going. Right. But like, the power of story, as you do realize where you are, you'll remember things that will give you the confidence to stand up.
Yeah.
We've all got a story. We've all got a journey. We've all got a past. And like, oh, you know what? I was strong then. I was strong at this point. I'm gonna be strong now.
Yeah, absolutely, right. You're going First Samuel on me now, right? I mean, but that's the idea, right? Yeah. Is that we have those things. So no, I totally agree, man. I love it. Hey, and look, tonight we've got a guest, Brent House, who's going to join us, and he's you and I had a brief pre-show call with him, and I think we laughed quite a bit in that call. He's a great guy. Man.
That's kind of a difficult thing, Tyler, you just did, because you just gave a hint to our guest that Brent House is funny.
Yeah, but maybe he's only funny to us. I don't know.
I know, right? You don't ever go up to a guy and say, hey, let me tell you a funny joke. No, just tell the joke.
Yeah.
Right.
And
because
if they don't laugh, you go, yeah, someone else told me that joke.
Right. But now it's like, oh man, this guy's funny. It's like,
yeah, we're
setting it up.
Well, look, if our audience doesn't laugh, then what can I say? What can I say? But I'm excited about tonight. Brent's got some good experiences in life that I think that he can share some things with us. He's got a great family, and I'm excited to talk to him about how he's navigated this thing that we call life. And I'm curious, I'd love to get Brent's take, Mike, on this idea of setbacks.
Yeah, let's just put him in a real vulnerable spot right away, right?
Let's hit him. I'm going to let
Brent House talk to me about setbacks, talk to me about comebacks.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's kick this door open. Let's let him in the room, and then you hit him between the eyes with that one, all right? So, here we go.
He knows he's going to get hit between the eyes with something.
Yeah.
It might as well be something profound, right?
I think everyone's hoping that when they come in, they're talking about cold cereal or sweatpants. And
right. But now it's like Brent House, boom, right between the eyes.
Right between the eyes, man. Right in the kisser, So, well, we're glad you're here, Brent. We're Mike and I were, before you came in, we were having a conversation about the setbacks of life. And I would like to get your take on a couple things, and I'm going to let Mike pose the question to you.
Yeah. Okay. So Brent, hey, we warned you in the pre-show, right? You're going to jump on a moving train, and who knows what you'll be jumping into. So just like this, Brent House, welcome to the richest men in town. Do you have a comeback story? A time where life dealt you a setback and you made a comeback.
Oh boy. Maybe it's because the way I look at myself is I would describe myself as extraordinarily ordinary. So, and you're like, what does that mean? How can you be both? And I think it's because I don't know if I've had a lot of super high ups, super low downs. I don't know if I've had, obviously we all go through hard things in life. But it's hard to look back and think, man, I went through a really hard time and got really punched in the face, and I got back up and got going. I think maybe the closest thing would be, I think that when I was getting my bachelor's degree, I think I felt a little lost. Like I didn't really know where I was going to go with my life, and probably, and after the fifth or sixth woman that dumped me, I thought we all go through those things when we're single, but and I think there was a time there, in college where I was like, what am I going to do with my life after this, and but I don't know if that's a comeback story. I think that's just more of like, hey, this is I kind of just felt lost.
But I think that is, because I think that, this is what I was telling Mike. I mean, we, with the benefit of hindsight, right, we can look at difficult situations and we can say, that was tough, but I learned these specific lessons, or I grew in these specific ways. And here's, kind of the benefit of what that hard thing was. What I was telling, we had a guest, I don't know if you knew Dave Voigtlander.
Yes.
But Dave Voigtlander was on our show, and he made the comment that he experienced a setback, and he said that setback set up my comeback. And I love that idea that we can go through the difficult things. And what I was telling Mike is I'd like to get to the point, and I think maybe now that I'm 47 years old, and I've got enough life and enough experiences behind me, that I can stand up in the middle of a hard thing and think, all right, what's the benefit? Where am I going to go from here and make this thing happen? Because in the past, I think I've spent time wallowing in whatever it was.
Sure.
I've let it sort of overwhelm me, Yeah. And now in hindsight, I can look back and go, yeah, that was a tough time, but I learned these lessons. But I think that where I want to be in the middle of it and stand up and go, okay, this sucks, but here we go. Right.
Yeah. Well, and I think for me, if I were that being one example, being a little lost, not really knowing where I'm going to go with my life. One of the things that my dad taught me was just to keep going. You have a choice. There are consequences to your choices, but you always have a choice, right? You can choose one way or the other. And, I remember going through that time, I remember thinking, okay, I'm going to look back to what I've been taught in my life, what I know are true principles, and I'm just going to keep taking one step at a time. Because a lot of times when you're stuck in those hard times, you can't really see out of it. You can't see that you're going to get out of it. You can't see where you're going to come out of it. You can't see how high you can reach after you get out of it. But what you have to do is just take one step at a time. You say, I'm gonna follow these principles that I believe in, and just take one step, and then I'm gonna take another step, and then I'm gonna take another step,
regardless of the drudgery or the pain, or right. I mean, you just got to do it.
Yeah, because it is painful, and sometimes when you're going through that, you realize that it may be painful for a while longer, maybe a lot longer, but you have to just keep moving forward. So,
yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, that
sounds fun.
Yeah,
it sounds fun. It's
this like episode is brought to you by Fun Comebacks.
Enduring to the end.
Well, I'm just like I say, I'm extraordinarily ordinary because I don't know. I'm not one of those ones who is like, okay, I'm down, and so, but then I'm like, I'm gonna come out of it alive, and I'm right. better than I was before.
Yeah,
I think I'm just more of the put my head down and just keep, taking one step at a time.
And I think there's a lot to be said for that, because I think you're right. There is, and again, I'll only use my own personal experience, right? But there's been times where I've allowed that to sort of distract me from moving forward, right? That idea of wallowing in whatever that misery is or that hardship, right? But I think that there's a lot of, power to just stand up and say, I'm just going to step forward. And it sucks and I'm hurt and things are, maybe I'm battered and broken a little bit, but I just got to take another step.
Yeah. And I talked about my dad kind of teaching me about choice. And I think my mom was more through just her example of just never giving up too. You can make choices and take those steps forward, and then you just don't give up. You're going to fall down, things are going to happen, and you just don't give up. I had an older brother who was autistic, severely autistic. And this was back when we knew less about that. We knew less about how to help kids like that. And it was very difficult for my parents to have him and then to have all of us other siblings. But my mom, even though I saw that she struggled and went through some hard things, she just didn't give up, and my dad tells the story of when they talked to a psychologist about him. The psychologist just told him, said, you should just give him up to the state because your marriage won't survive having an autistic child. That was his opinion.
Yeah.
And my parents just said, no, that's not what we're going to do. And, we're going to take care of him and our marriage is going to survive. And so that was just a good example to me of just never giving up, even through the really, really hard times.
Wow. Yeah. I'm curious, like that idea of, I don't know, like that idea of just like doggedly chasing, not even chasing, just like doggedly doing it, right? Like,
right.
There's a destination. You may not know what the destination looks like, but I'm just going to I'm on a path and I'm just going to keep moving down that path.
Right.
I mean,
think about the think about the faith that's required to hang on to covenants.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
When I think of Brent talking about extraordinary, ordinary, I'm going to do those things, those principles that I know to be true, and I have no idea what this is going to look like in the end, but I'm going to apply this because this is what I know.
Right.
Right.
Well, and Yeah, and I was thinking about looking through the list of possible questions that can be asked, and one of the questions, and you hear this question, people will say, if you look back to when you were a young man or something, and what you thought you would do with your life, where are you at now compared to that? And I looked at that question and I thought, I honestly, when I was young, did not know where I would be. And part of me didn't care so much. Like, I didn't care about the details. I just was thinking it was more of, what kind of person do I want to be? I didn't really care about what career I had, or even where I lived, or things like that. But it's kind of like, what kind of person do I want to be? And I think those are the important choices you make. And so as I've gone through my life, and now, with my wife and family, and we make decisions on where we move, what we, maybe career changes, things like that, I realize that it's a lot of those choices don't really matter. Like, I'd say, well, should I do this or should I do this? And I get this answer. It doesn't matter. You can do either. But what really matters is, how are you going to change?
Yeah, it's not the work we do, it's what the work does to us.
Yes.
Right. And I think that's Heavenly Father. That's what Heavenly Father looks at and says, you know what? It doesn't matter what you do. What matters is, what is this going to do to you?
Yeah.
Yes.
What process is this going to do? Like, I think of that, that I think I've shared that Maya Angelou quote before. Like, I'm not things that are happening in life will change me, but they will not diminish me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right? Like, there will not,
Yes.
I'm going to go through this thing, but there will not be less of me on the other end of this than there was going in.
Right.
And I think that's life. That's the purpose of life. The purpose of life is for it to pass through us and we become something.
Yes.
Better.
Well, yeah. And I actually was teaching a mission prep class just this last week. And we were talking about, the purpose of life, essentially, is the questions that everyone asks. Why am I here? What am I doing here? And unfortunately, the easiest thing to go to is, I'll just make money. I'll accumulate things. I will, get some kind of worldly success or fame. And we talked about that and how that isn't what God's currency is. If you say, oh, I'm going to be successful in life, it's not money, It's not a lot of money. It's not a lot of things. It's not a nice house. It's not a fast car. It's not any of those things. The currency is us.
Right.
We are God's currency. And so obviously, becoming that person that you want to become is what's most important. And then helping other people become what they want to become and change and become or not just people they want to become, but what God wants them to become. So, and I think, and again, kind of going back to, there are some personalities that are the kind where they go through a tough time and they come blasting out, it's like they're sprinting out and being like, I got out of this, but that's just not my personality. Mine is more just, you see me just taking that one step at a time, just barely kind of trudging out of it and being like, okay, I made it.
I'm reminded, listening to that, I'm reminded how I used to work for my grandpa on a golf course, and he would hold up his thumb watching me from a distance and trying to track my movement. I didn't move very fast, but slow and steady wins the race.
Well, I mean, just a few weeks ago, I was down in Provo with my kids, because most of my kids are at school there. And we hiked up Y Mountain, which, it not just up to the Y, but actually to the top of the mountain.
Whoa.
And so you have to kind of go up and around, and it's steep. It's a steep trail.
Okay.
And the last third of it was in about a foot of snow because they'd had a snowstorm.
Oh man.
We got there. And of course my girls were in shorts because it was at the day we went, it was like in the 60s. But it was steep, and I remember and I've done that hike before, but it was so steep that my legs were just burning, like I was like, man, I was literally thinking to myself, I don't know if I'm going to make it,
Right.
I've made it before, but it's just that thing. And I remember even on that hike, just take the next step, take the next step, take the next step.
Yeah.
And eventually you're there and you're like, wow, I made it.
Yeah. I'm curious, Brent, when you talked about, not when you were young, not really being worried about maybe what the outcome was, but more of like career or, those kind of things, but more of what you would become or what kind of person you would be.
Right.
Where does that come from? Is that discussions that are had in the home with mom and dad, or is that?
Oh, yeah, I think mostly. Yeah. And obviously, when you're praying and hearing things and getting those impressions, of, hey, I just care about who you are, But yeah, certainly my parents were a good example of that. That there were, they didn't put a lot of emphasis on a lot of the worldly things that I did, but they were concerned about how if I was kind to my friends, or if I was honest with the things that I did, and one of the things, probably one of my biggest personality things is I want to be a dependable person that people can count on. If I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. If someone needs help, I want to help them. And I learned that from my parents, and that a lot of that is from, them teaching me. And then of course, and it's funny because I'm telling you, this is, you're young at 47. I'm 50, right? I'm getting really old. So
yeah, you were
over the hill now.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's funny because I know that, like, I'll get that answer almost every day. Remember what's important. Remember who you are, what you want to become. But then I let myself worry about things that don't matter as much. I worry about money. I worry about, what people think about me. I worry about things that don't matter every day. It seems like I fall back into that, and I'm like, how do I get out of that more, but.
Well, I'm excited to have you on the program, and I'm excited to dig in and get the answers to all of those big questions that we find ourselves asking. But really quick, Tyler, what do you love about Brent House?
I mean, just what Brent talks about, wanting to be the guy that is dependable and that is going to do what he says he's going to do. I mean, that's Brent House. I mean, and all the time I've been able to spend around Brent, he is reliable, and he's steady, and he is always had good advice for me when I've had to lean on him. And so, how could you not love having a person like that in your life that is kind of the steady, what you're going to get. And that's what I love about Brent is, and he makes me laugh too. I mean, he makes me laugh as well. So that doesn't hurt, but yeah, I mean,
dad humor,
but he's a dependable, steady, spiritual guy. And I think that everybody needs a friend like that in their life for sure.
So Brent, as you hear that, and you're invited to come on a podcast that Tyler hosts called The Richest Men in Town, what goes through your mind?
I think that's one of the hard things in life. I think that a lot of times we want to be something we're not, right? We have dreams about, and I think sometimes that's one of my struggles is I want to be that dependable person. I want to be, and I naturally kind of like to sink into the background and not be up front, but then sometimes I want to, or I feel like I should, right? Oh, I need to be up front. I need to lead. I need to do these things, but my nature is not to do that. And so I'm constantly fighting, like, and almost thinking I'm not good enough, right? I being who I am isn't good enough.
Okay, can I stop
Sure.
there and dig into that a little bit?
Yeah.
So we have a former guest, friend of the program, David Hill. David Hill wrote a book about Boris the robot. And Boris the robot is loved by a family, but he's made out of junk.
Yes.
From a junkyard. And he can be surrounded by family and be reminded that he's loved, but every once in a while, the robot, Boris, hears the scrap man's voice.
Yeah.
Scrap man's voice sings a song reminding him that he's made of junk.
Right.
So I don't want to make you too vulnerable, but you just kind of let us in a little bit on what that scrap man's voice says to you, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, and I think that's
that internal script that sometimes runs.
Yeah, that's one of my biggest struggles too. Is sometimes think, oh, I'm not enough. I need to be more. I need to be better. I need to be, and again, you know who you are, but sometimes you just have this feeling that I need to be everything. I need to be able to, I want to be good at everything. I want, which is impossible, right? I mean, you're never going to get there. But it's just that constant, well, you're not enough. You need to do more. You need to do more. And actually one of the songs that I love is from Lauren Daigle. That's I think the name of it's You Say, but it has beautiful words because it basically says at the beginning, it talks about how you get the feelings that you're not enough, that you'll never be enough, and then it goes on to talk. It's actually a beautiful song about Jesus Christ and his atonement, and how no matter how I'm trying to think of the word, not being enough. I'm trying to think of a different word, but is that the message is you are enough. You're loved. You are, you're worth, really an infinite amount. But it's just a beautiful song. But it's still a struggle because you still have those voices come in your head that say, you need to do more. You need to be better. And so I think that, that's something I've probably struggled with my whole life. And you kind of, and I go up and down with it, but yeah, that is definitely part of who I am. So,
and I think, I think if we're all honest, right, that's a conversation that we all have on some level, right, Mike, that there's this.
Oh yeah. I was just telling you, like,
you said, I feel like I'm a house of cards. Right?
Yeah. I'm in this space where everyone is looking at me like I've got it put together. And I want to tell everybody I'm a house of cards.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like and you're an imposter. Like you don't belong here. Right.
Yeah.
And it's the same scrap man, like it has the same intent. It has the same, it's an antichrist message. It's basically negating what he has done in our life.
Yes.
So
and he wants us to take that hook.
So what's the conversation that changes that? Because here we are, we're three very seasoned, wise. We've gone through some stuff. We got some years among the three of us. All right. Well, and yet here we are at 47, 50, and 46. Mike Freeman, you are the youngster
of
the youngster,
the junior of the group. Well, yeah. Hey, in that spirit, I looked up the words. Can I just read some of these?
Yes, they're great.
These I won't sing.
Okay. Yeah, please.
I keep fighting voices in my mind that say I'm not enough. Every single lie that tells me I'll never measure up. Am I more than just the sum of every high and every low? Remind me once again just who I am, because I need to know. You say I'm loved when I can't feel a thing. You say I'm strong when I think I am weak. You say I am held when I am falling short. And when I don't belong, you say I'm yours.
Yeah, it's a beautiful song. I mean, and
Love that.
And I actually, shared that when I taught seminary and this is with the high school age kids.
And for those of you that don't know what seminary is, it is a religious course taught to high school age students.
Yeah.
Typically,
in addition
to their regular classes at the crack of dawn. All right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
okay.
Well, and I shared that with them because, that is one of the most vulnerable times of your life. You're trying to grow up, you're trying to figure out who you want to be. And so that's a super important time to realize that, Jesus Christ is there for us, that we are enough because of what he did. And so that's the cool thing though. And I talked about how my whole life I struggle a little bit with, feelings of inadequacy, or, that was the word I was thinking of probably.
Yeah.
Feelings of inadequacy. But going back to when I was young, learning that I am enough and really knowing that inside, that's what keeps you going. And that's what kind of pulls you out of it when you go through those kinds of down.
Here's the danger. Here's the danger of this. And for folks that are listening, I just want to highlight this. The scrap man's voice isn't necessarily false.
Right.
We are train wrecks.
We are.
Right?
Yeah.
We are mortal. We are going to make mistakes. We are, in Boris's story, he was made of trash. Right?
Yeah.
So it comes down to, Brent, what you were saying, like what your father said. Choices, consequences. Who are you going to believe?
Yeah.
Who are you going to listen to? Because obviously the Savior is not lying either.
Right.
He knows all of the shortcomings, and he's telling you that you're loved and that you belong and that you're enough because of his atoning sacrifice, right?
Yeah.
So you have two things that are true. Which one are you going to grab onto? Which one are you going to build a life around? Right. And that's going to determine everything.
Well, I think, and going back to what Tyler asked, what do we say to get out of that? Like, what conversation do you have to combat, those negative thoughts? And I think what it is, because what you said, what the scrap man says is true. You are made of junk, right? Our bodies are made of dust. We will eventually die and go to the, dust, become dust of the earth. So I think what you have to say is you're right. I am made of junk, but junk is okay, right? Junk is good, or the dust is good. What I'm made of is good. And then also realize that God made us. God made me. And even though I am imperfect, what can pull me out of it is thinking my imperfections are okay.
Yeah.
The junky part of me is okay.
And we talk about believing in Jesus Christ, but it's like that. Stephen Robinson had the book Believing Christ.
Right.
Not just believing in him, but believe him.
Believing Believing the word.
When you hear him say, right? When you hear his, or you feel that presence and you feel that message of love and of belonging and of enough, believe him.
Yes.
I think too, like to have I think there's some value in this conversation right now, because I think there's people that, and I've had conversations with people in various stages of their lives, right, where they feel that that inadequacy, right? They feel that in their own lives, and they dwell on it, right? They let that engulf them, and it becomes the definition of them, right?
Right.
And I think that it's important to, we talk about this journey of self-discovery, and as we're young, we're going through these things. And I think that there's an idea that there's a culminating event that we experience so much, and all of a sudden we know who we are, and we're supremely confident in those things, right? And I think that the idea that there's ebbs and flows in all this, there's peaks and valleys. I mean, even now, here we are, Mike. I mean, you are the youngest in the group, so I'm not sure what this says, but you did say, I felt like a house of cards. And I think it's okay for people to feel that way right now in the middle of their life where they are now, but understand that that's not the definition of who they are, right? You can have this other conversation and this deeper understanding of who you are and move past that moment.
Yes.
And I think that there's a lot of value in that, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think too that somewhere in there is how to be humble.
Yeah.
Right. Somewhere in there is to be sure that we're not walking around saying, I got this. That we're not walking around denying really where our strength comes from, right? Or denying where that grace comes from that covers us.
Right.
Yes.
And I think that that's powerful. Now, I would say if we're moping around and all we see in front of us is our inadequacies, I don't think that's humility.
No. Well, I feel like when you are faced with your own inadequacies, there are two kind of negative ways you can take it. One of them is you're going to act like you have no inadequacies, right?
Yeah.
And you just step all over.
That is what precedes the fall.
Yeah, and you step all over people and you say, I'm awesome. And I think you're just trying to convince yourself that you're awesome.
Yeah.
And then you step on people, you don't care if you hurt anybody. But the other way that you can take that negatively is kind of almost the opposite direction, where, like you were just saying, you dwell on your inadequacies, you become a victim, and you just constantly feel sorry for yourself. I was really good at that when I was younger. I feel like that's one thing I've overcome to some extent, is feeling sorry for myself. But when I was younger, that's what I would do. I'd see it. I would look at all of my weaknesses and be like, oh, poor me, I'm just, oh, poor me, and you become a victim, and you almost, if you become too much of a victim, you never come out of it, because you almost get addicted to that feeling of, oh, I'm always going to be this way. I'm never going to improve.
Like a habit. It's a habit loop.
Yeah,
right?
It's a habit, really. Yeah. And so humility, I love that you bring that up, because that's the key. Humility is what keeps you from going either of those directions. Is that, and you can actually go up. So
yeah, and I think humility is singing that song, right? Humility is saying, let me tell you, everything good that you might see happening here, let me tell you where that came from.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And making sure that, like Tyler says, don't inhale. Like people are going to say nice things. Don't believe the hype.
Yeah.
Like make sure that you give credit where credit is due. And
yeah. Well, and I, you were asking about, how do you, I think, how have I dealt with that in my life? And I thought about, I've talked about the hinge moments of life, where maybe small things you've done that have led to, great things in the future. And I don't, as I think of that, I can't think of a lot of things like that. I feel like there's 100 small choices that lead you to a certain destination. But if there's one that I would pick, it's probably what led me, to get married to my wife. We when we were dating, she was still pretty young. I think she was a sophomore in college, and I was a little bit older. But being afraid of getting married, she ended up breaking up with me a few times. And I think that like the third time that she broke up with me, I kind of hit this decision where I was like, am I done with this? Or
I think that's a natural question.
It is, right? And I remember, and of course she came back to me and said, no, I don't want to break up. I and I think that was the time too where she decided that she wanted to marry me, but I had a decision, as I was like, am I gonna let this go or keep on this path? And I decided to move forward with Amy, and we got married and have a great family. And I look back and I think, that's definitely one of the hinge moments. It seemed like, at the time, I don't know, because I didn't know if we were going to get married, but it definitely has changed my life, because, her encouragement and help is, one of the main reasons that I am who I am today. We help each other, but she definitely is someone who I think helps bring out the best in who I am. And so that was definitely a hinge moment in my life. I couldn't think of too many others. But
what does the family look like? You said you had kids at college? Give me some names and dates. I don't mean to test you.
Well, Rebecca is my oldest, and she's married. She's 23, and she has a son. So I'm actually a grandfather now.
All right.
Yeah, it's awesome. And they live down in Farmington, Utah. And she's just loving being a mother, honestly, which by the way is the most important job in the world. So being a mother or father. Mm-hmm. But and then Josh is my second. He's a year younger. He's 22. Actually, no, Rebecca's 24. Josh is 23. See, I'm already losing it here.
Well, you are Josh 50, Brent,
Josh is 23. He's married, and they're in school still. And they both married really great people. So I was super happy about that. And then Elizabeth is my next, and she is 20, and she's in school right now. And then Emma is also in school. Like I say, most of my kids are down at school. And she's 18. Well, she's almost 19. And then my youngest is still at home. Sarah, she's a senior in high school. So
almost empty nesters right there.
Oh, we're getting ready for it. But this is one of the things that I look, if I ever, think that something's hard in my life, or, oh, this is terrible, I can look at my wife and kids, and I can think, wow, I am, when you look at God's currency, I am rich, I have a beautiful wife. I've got wonderful children that just always show love and support to me and to my wife. And so as soon as I think about that, I think, oh man, why am I complaining? Why am I, worrying about certain things if I've got this, So I think that's, that obviously there, because that is God's currency, people. And so that, to me, makes me rich. So That's
Well, easy. You gotta save something for our last question, brother.
Well, you better have
we can end early. See, so
I'm curious, Brent, in you've talked a lot about it, about faith and sort of how that's impacted your journey in life and your decisions that you've made. Can you go back to you growing up and what faith looked like, what examples of faith looked like to you as a young person?
Yeah, well, I struggle sometimes going back too far because my memory is starting to fade a little bit from.
You're getting up there.
You got to get some Prevagen or some ginkgo biloba or something.
Ginkgo biloba.
I've already kind of mentioned this, but my parents, of course, were great examples of faith. My dad grew up in a home, where, I mean, his mother was a faithful person. His dad was a good person, but not really, didn't have, wasn't very religious, didn't really care too much about that at first. But my dad, and he had some brothers who were kind of just all over the place. Good people, but just weren't real focused on faith or spiritual things. But he was, which to me was just mind blowing, because so he just had that faith. And so that was a great example to me. When he was 16 or 17, he baptized his father, because his father eventually became spiritual, kind of got that faith. And my dad was able to baptize him. And that was a great example to me. And then my mom, who, despite all of the hardships in her life, she just stayed faithful the whole time. And she was funny because, and this is where she's probably where I'm like her. She would complain. She would be like, "Oh, this, and why is this happening?" Or "Why this person's asking me to do this?" But then she would do it. She would do it, and she was kind and generous and helpful to people, and so always had that faith. So as a kid growing up, I had experiences like that where I saw my parents do that. I'll give you one experience when I was in high school. And this was kind of, it is about faith. It's about kind of having faith in what you believe and what you know to be right. And, one of the things that I was taught growing up is to try to be clean and stay away from kind of the filthy media and things like that. Today we've got, terrible pornography and things like that is just, a click away. Back then, it was in movies and things like that. And I remember being at a 7-Eleven where, they had like VHS tapes that you could rent. And my friends and I were there going to rent a movie, and they were, all the movies they were looking at were movies that weren't very good, that weren't very clean, and rated R, a lot of them. And I remember thinking, I don't want to watch that. I want to watch something that's good and clean. And I had to make a decision. Maybe that was, and maybe that's maybe a hinge point, right? When you say, am I going to speak up or not? And these were 3 of my best friends. And I was worried when you're in high school, you're worried about being cool and, looking good and not offending people. But I finally, I got up the courage and said, you know what? Let's pick a movie that's not rated R. And it took so much, it feels like it took so much courage for me to say that. And you know what my friends' responses were? Okay.
Right.
You know, they were, what I built up in my head was they were going to be like, oh my gosh, you are the weirdest person. You're not cool. You can't be our friend. You know, their response was, okay. You know,
Right.
and in a way they were kind of like, that's good. Yeah, we'll pick a different movie. We don't care.
Yeah.
And they were there to support me. They were my friends, right? And they were true friends, and they were going to support me with what I believed in. And so, you know, and I think that was an experience where I really reflected on that a lot and thought, I can do this. I can stand up for what I believe in. I can have faith in that, and not be worried too much about that.
What does that look like for 50-year-old Brent House now?
Yeah, I mean,
same principle.
Yeah, peer
what
pressure
does that
doesn't
look like
end.
now?
Yeah.
Peer pressure doesn't end. I mean, you know, there are many times when you know, I own a business now, and I get people that give me advice about, you know, doing things with your taxes or with whatever that is dishonest, you know. And it's like, well, everyone's doing it. It's kind of an acceptable, it's accepted in society because everyone does it, and so everyone gets away with it, unless you get audited by the IRS, and then maybe you don't. But and so that peer pressure is always there, and it's sometimes difficult, even after 50 years and a lot of experiences that build your faith. I still have to look at that and go, no, I'm going to be honest with what I do, and then let things happen the way they happen, you know. Because, you know, what am I worried about now? Money. I mean, I have a business. I got to make enough money to stay in business. But I can't sacrifice, you know, my standards for that. But yeah, those experiences don't go away.
But there's always lures in the water, right?
Yeah.
There's always something tempting you just to see, okay,
Always.
We tried it when he was 17. Let's keep trying to see if Brent might, moment of weakness, maybe he's hungry or tired or angry.
Yeah.
Let's see if he'll take the bait.
Yep.
Yeah.
So in looking back, I mean, is there a moment, or are there moments, or maybe it was at the 7-Eleven getting a movie, but is there a moment where those examples of faith growing up by your parents become solidified into your own faith?
Well, yeah, I mean, experiences like that are definitely a good example. But I think one of the things that solidifies my faith too is when I get, you know, answers to my prayers. And I remember,
what's that process been like for you throughout the years? I mean, is that a learned behavior?
Yeah, for sure. I'll give you I'll tell a story about an answered prayer and how that built, you know, has strengthened my faith for sure. But I know when I graduated from BYU and I decided I needed to get an advanced degree, I needed to get a graduate degree. So I went up to Washington State University and got into the microbiology program there. And at about 2 years, you have to decide if you're going to get a master's or go on and get your PhD. And at the time, I thought, well, I just want to get a master's and get out and start working. We'd been poor now for a number of years, and you know, you want to get out and make money.
Time for the struggle to end, right?
Yeah. And I remember actually fasting and praying, and I got an answer. You need to stay and get your PhD. And so I thought, okay, I wasn't real happy with that answer to start. And but I went on for a few months, and then it got down really to the wire where I had to make that decision like right away. And then I thought, maybe I didn't hear correctly on that one, you know. maybe, maybe I just wasn't listening well enough. And so I actually fasted and prayed again. And the cool thing on the second time I got the answer, and this is where I think I learned that God can be merciful. He gave me the same answer. You need to get your PhD. But this time I got an explanation of why. Instead of just do it, it was like, and here's why. It's not because you need to get a PhD. You know, the degree doesn't matter. But it's because there are some things that you need to learn in this process of getting that degree. There are some things that I need you to learn so that you can become the kind of person that I want you to become. And so, you know, that was a huge strength that was added to my faith from that. And I've had, you know, several other times when I've prayed about big decisions like that, and I've truly gotten answers and felt like, wow, this is, you know, God does care about me, and he's going to answer some of these questions that I have. And it's not just do this, but it's also sometimes you get the answer of why, which is cool.
Yeah. How do you honor your parents?
I mean, I think the best, I remember teaching this in one of the seminary classes, talking about parents. How do you honor your parents?
Because it's still a commandment, right?
Yeah. How do you honor your father and mother? And I remember telling them the best way that you can honor your parents is to obey them, right? Or to do the things that they taught you to do. And so I feel like, I hope that I'm honoring my parents by being the kind of person that they taught me to be. You know, my dad was extremely hard worker. In fact, he told me the other day, well, it was probably a couple of years ago, but he kind of said, I either work or I die, you know, because he's getting a little older. He's almost 80 years old. He goes out and works on the church farm every week, you know, goes out and helps him fix his machinery. And
wow,
he's just a hard worker. And so I'm a hard worker. I go out and I kind of put my head down and work. And then for my mom, you know, she was the one that kind of taught, you know, don't give up, just keep going, get up and keep going, even when times are hard. And so to me, the best way to honor them is just to be the person that they taught me to be. So.
Well, going back to that idea of faith for a second, you know, you talked about the example of your parents. You talked about some of your own personal experiences that helped to shape that. You have some great kids. I know your kids, and
yeah,
and I'll vouch for you. They're pretty amazing. But what do you hope that they're learning from you as it pertains to faith?
Oh man, that's a tough question. Actually, Tyler, I'm going to go back to something that you taught me. When we served together in the bishopric, I know one of the things that you would always say is that, you know, I believe in the gospel of Jesus Christ, every word of it. I don't know if you remember that. I mean, you probably still say it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that's ingrained in you, which is great. And I think that is what I try to teach my kids is to say, take what you've learned, take what you know to be true, and and believe every word of it. Don't just be like, I like this part, but this part, especially because it's really hard, it's hard to live and it's hard to do. I'm going to kind of set that aside.
Or it's not popular right now.
It's not popular.
Yeah.
And so it really, and here's where my wife, again, she's, the best thing that has happened to me. But one of the great things that she's done is, as our kids have started to leave home, she implemented a weekly phone call with them. Like every Sunday night, we have a phone call with them. And we go around, everyone, all of our kids and us, we talk about something we learned that week.
I love that.
And it's usually spiritual, but it doesn't have to be. It can be, something they learned in school, something cool that they came across in whatever they've been doing that week. But the cool thing is that it's amazing. I get on that call and I will say again, my wife is the best thing that's happened, because she's good at a lot of things I'm not good at. So she's good at coming at deciding that there's something good to do like that, and then just sticking to it, just grabbing onto it like a bulldog.
Yeah.
And I know when we first started that, there were some weeks where, well, this person couldn't do it at this time and that person couldn't do it. And I just was like, well, we don't have to do this every week, maybe once a month, maybe, but and she was like, nope, we're doing it every week, And what's happened is that our kids love it. Like, if there's ever a week where we're like, well, there's a few people that can't be on, maybe we shouldn't do it. And they're like, no, we're doing it, And so, but it's so cool because they get on and they share something they've learned, and they're always sharing experiences of faith, things that they read, things that they learned. And it just makes me feel so good that even though they've left home, they're continuing to have that faith.
In those calls, are you sharing things that you and Amy are learning as well?
Oh yeah. Everyone shares. So Amy and I share as well.
I love that idea of always learning and always teaching, right? I think those two things together are super powerful. I love that idea.
Well, and you're talking about faith and every, not just on those phone calls, but when I write in my journal or do whatever, I will write down things I've learned. And sometimes I get frustrated because I'm like, I can't believe I didn't learn this until now,
Right.
or
I had to learn this again. Dang it.
Or this is the 10th time I've had to learn this lesson.
Right. Yeah.
But it is cool to hear some of the things that my kids are learning, continuing to learn, and primarily about faith. So.
Yeah.
Hey, can I go back to April 1996 really quick? Brent House, you were talking a little bit about how Tyler would say, I believe the gospel of Jesus Christ, every word of it. And as you shared that, I thought of Gordon B. Hinckley's interview with Mike Wallace. And I'm just going to read this transcript exchange. This is 60 Minutes, Mike Wallace, renowned journalist, and then president of the church, Gordon B. Hinckley, in 1996. Mike Wallace says, "Your church says God and Jesus spoke with your founder, Joseph Smith, back in 1820 and told him to start this church. You believe that?" Gordon B. Hinckley, "Yes, sir." "He was 14 years old." "Yes, sir." "A backwoods farm boy." "Yes, sir." "In New York State." Gordon B. Hinckley, "That's the miracle of it." Right? And then he continues, He says, Mike Wallace says, no alcohol, no tobacco, no coffee, no tea.
Right.
Gordon B. Hinckley. Right. Mike Wallace, eat meat sparingly, exercise. Gordon B. Hinckley. Right. Get plenty of sleep. Right. Right. It's so crystal in that exchange.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like every bit of it. There's not one of those like, oh, I don't know about that. Oh, I don't know about
Yeah.
that. Gordon B. Hinckley, powerful witness. Like,
Yeah,
isn't it wonderful?
I love that.
Yeah.
I love
Brent,
it.
what are you learning from your kids?
What am I learning from my kids?
Yeah.
Well, for one, that people can turn out pretty good despite your best efforts. I hope I'm learning some humility from them. When you're a parent, I like the saying. There's an old saying that before you have kids, when you're single, you have no kids and a lot of theories on how to raise kids. And after you have kids, you have a lot of kids and no theories on how to raise kids because none of them work. And you just, as you're raising them, you're just hoping and praying that they're going to turn out well. And the humbling part is you do your best, but God has to make up for what you can't do. And so I've seen that, and so I think my kids are teaching me humility. And in these weekly phone calls, they're talking about things they're learning, and I'm thinking, wow, I don't think I knew that when I was their age.
Oh, they're way ahead.
Yeah, I'm like, oh my gosh.
They're way ahead.
Yeah, so it's humbling, and it's very fulfilling to see that, but it is humbling. And one of the, and thinking about not just with my kids, but with, starting my own business a year ago and moving and having a lot of change in the last couple of years and all of our kids leaving home. But I really have learned about how much pride that I have, and if you go back to a famous quote from the movie Shrek, where he says,
"This might be a first. This might be a first."
Yeah, you're the first to quote Shrek. I like it. Keep going.
Ogres are like onions. You remember that quote, right?
Oh yeah, layers.
And he talks about how they have layers, right? Just like onions have layers. And that's the thing about pride too, is that and in the scriptures it talks about being stripped of pride, right? That you want to be stripped of pride. And I've always thought that's a strange, like, why wouldn't you say remove? Why wouldn't you say, take away? Or why wouldn't you, any other, why would you say stripped of pride? And I thought, because pride, we all have pride, and it's in layers. Like you almost don't know that you have a certain pride until you strip the first layer of pride away, and then you're like, oh my gosh, I have this other pride, I got to strip that away. Oh, there's this other one,
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that pride actually comes in layers like that, like ogres. So ogres are like onions, are like pride. So
I love it. I love it.
But that's it. I mean, when I look at my kids and I just think, wow, they're just so awesome. And at some point in my life, I thought I was going to be the one to teach them all these things. And I've realized that God is the one that has to teach them. I'm kind of I was a facilitator when they lived at home. But God's the one that has to do it.
Brent, can you get into your decision to start your own company? Like, I can imagine there's some certain risk there. And what would you if you were to teach a little lesson on taking risk, what would that lesson sound like?
Yeah. Well, I am one of the most, risk averse people. And when I got into, I joined the Navy. I worked for the federal government. That's like one of the least risky jobs in the world. But and so I have that personality of being risk averse. I'm not a natural entrepreneur who's like, I'm just going to risk it all, and because I want to do what I want to do. And so when my wife and I decided to start this business, basically what it was, again, this goes to, we really prayed about this one, fasted and prayed about this one. And we got the answer, yes, that's a good thing to do. Again, it wasn't the only thing. It wasn't like, yes, you have to start a business, but it was like, and the answer was, it's going to be okay. The answer wasn't necessarily, you're going to be successful at business, but it's going to be okay. And then I also got a little bit of the why. Why is it going to be okay? And it was because you're going to learn some things in the process of starting this business.
That's a familiar message.
Yeah, that's
that theme. Are going to help you. And I even understood, I even got the answer that it was going to be difficult. Like, you're going to go through some tough times and you're going to learn some things from it.
Can I? Okay, keep going. I'm sorry, Brent. Yeah.
No. And I'll just quickly say, and there's risk. There's so much risk when you start a business, but the way that my risk averse personality was able to handle it was my faith, right? Is to say, God has said this is okay. And so even though it's risky, I'm going to do it. So
can you, I like that. I appreciate you sharing that. And I'm curious if you'd be willing to share sort of that process of seeking out those answers.
Right.
I think that we've had this conversation a lot on this podcast about, revelation and
yes,
and seeking that. And, some people have expressed that maybe the difficulty that comes with that, that pursuit of revelation. I'm curious if you wouldn't mind shedding some light on that process that you've gone through.
Right.
And Tyler, I appreciate that question, because as people listen, you are receiving answers, you are receiving messages.
Yes.
Right? You are receiving complete thoughts.
Yes.
You're not talking about receiving an answer and breaking down in tears or feelings. You're having impressions.
Yes. Yes.
And I would love to jump into that a little bit, because people listening to that might be like, well, what does that process look like?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's tough. And this is the hard thing about receiving revelation and feeling the Holy Ghost or the Spirit of God, is you don't, everyone hears it a little differently. Right. So, but I think it is useful to have multiple people describe how they receive revelation, because then, eventually people will be like, oh, that's how I receive it. To me, it's so when I approach a problem where I need an answer, I do a lot of my own studying. I study it out. I look at the pros and cons. I look at the different options. And I do a lot of thinking about it, meditating, maybe too much. I sometimes to a point where I just get so anxious, but and then you usually from that you come up with what you think is a good answer. Like if you were to logically say, if I'm just going to logically make a decision here, what would it be? And so then you come up with that logical decision. Now, sometimes you might have intuition or something else where you're like, I'm going to go with the non-logical answer, because that's I just kind of feel like that's what it's going to be. But then that's where you have to approach God with that, and you have to say, okay, I've done my homework, I've tried to really study this out, and I want to come to you and say, is this a good answer? Is this the right answer, or is this a good answer? And then you have to pray, and you have to pray with humility. You have to pray willing to get whatever answer will come. You have to be ready to get the negative answer if that's, you may be invested and say, I really want this to be the answer, and be willing for it to come back negative. But and then the other thing about one thing I've learned about prayer, which again, this is one of those things where I look back and think, why did it take me till I was 50 years old to learn this? Is that you have to pray specifically. I think a lot of people pray very ambiguously, help, bless my kids. Well, with what?
Yeah.
What do they need to be blessed with, And I think, God wants us to pray specifically. He wants us to come to him with specific requests. And so that's when you go in prayer, you specifically say, here's the answer. Here's the question I have, specific question I have. Here's the specific request that I have. And then to me, the answer usually does not come while I'm praying. It usually comes later on when and many times it comes when I'm going through a difficult thing, difficult time. And all of a sudden this answer will come to me. Oh, remember that thing you were praying about? Here's the answer.
How do you know?
And that's it's weird because it doesn't come as words. I don't hear words. It comes as an impression. And I'm a scientist, trained scientist, so I understand the scientific method. And
Are you a doctor?
Yes. Well, I mean a PhD. So, but
would you like doctor in the title?
Yes, I mean that is Dr. House. I mean,
Richest Men in Town with Dr. Brent House. Got it.
Yeah. So, but it just it's one of those things where you just get an impression. I get an impression in my mind, and I just understand it. Right? There's no words to it. It's just an impression. And again, going back to, I understand the scientific method, doing observations to figure out what's going on. And when I get these answers to prayers, I know it. I have a greater understanding of that truth than if I were to do a scientific experiment and observe it 100 times, And I don't know how to explain that.
Is that through that's through a tried and tested work, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you do that process enough.
Yes.
And the impressions, I think all of us can relate to a moment in time where maybe we've gone through that process and we've approached God with a certain question, and then we receive some impression. We think, is that me? Or is that right? But I think when like you say, you do the work enough and you can start to differentiate what those impressions are. Right. And I think it's interesting too, because you said, okay, in talking about starting a business, you said the answer was, it'll be okay, which isn't like a bang, here's the lottery, man, you did it, right? You unearthed this thing. This is amazing. And then the second part of that was, and you're going to learn some tough lessons.
Yeah.
Like, I just think that that's an interesting, right? It's interesting. And what I find interesting about that is that I think what I find interesting is the faith to act on those answers, right? Because I think that sometimes, you know, we go, hey, I've got this job opportunity. It's X amount of dollars in the bank if I do it.
Yep.
And then I got this other one that's a little less than X, you know, what should I do? And we're hoping that's the answer. And I think that if the answer was, yeah, I think you want to take the job with less money, because there's some really hard lessons that you're learning that, what would we do? Right. I mean, I think there's a lot of faith attached to that, to kind of turning towards that thing and saying, yeah, let me do this thing, because I think that there's some things that will make me, it kind of goes back to what you said at the beginning of this whole thing, which is I'm less concerned about what it is I'm going to do and more concerned about what I'm going to become.
Yes.
And maybe if that's I'm just connecting these dots as we go, Mike. So
yeah,
No, I
already got this, right?
No, I think in over time, you know, we talk about faith, but it's almost a confidence.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, like over time, it's like, okay, I know what that feels like.
Yeah.
And I'm going to confidently, like I experimented 100 times and I got the same answer, you know, like we can go forward when it hits the mind and it hits the heart at the same time. You know, you can go confidently and know that, you know, as long as you do your part, that promise is going to happen.
Well, and that's and again, I kind of talked about God's currency of being us, right? And when I got that answer, just that it's going to be okay to start the business, you know, I got this impression that, you know, the success of your business doesn't really matter. I mean, you know, like at the end of the day, businesses go away and money goes away and all these things go away. But what lasts is who I become. And the employees that I have. Does the business bless their lives? You know, does it help them become people that they need to become? You know, are we able to serve the community with the business? Those are the things that matter, right? And so when I get so worried about the money, or if I'm building something that's going to be successful in, you know, 20 years from now, those things aren't quite as important. It's you know, how we're affecting people. So,
well, I appreciate the description, Mike, of that process, because to me, it's like, you know, as Brent's talking, I'm thinking, okay, it's Ether 6, it's second Nephi 4, 20, 25, right? It's this ask not amiss. It's this study it out. I love the specificity of the process. Like, I'm bringing this thing and I'm trying to align this thing with what I think God wants. I think I appreciate you taking the time to explain that.
So Brent, can we swing to the opposite? I think the opposite for me of faith is fear.
Yeah.
What are you afraid of?
Yeah, actually, that's an easy one.
Is it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. My biggest fear is failure. You know, and I think that's, and unfortunately, I think a lot of times the fear is too many times is failure in the eyes of men, right? In the eyes of mankind. Because if you truly understand what life is about, and, you know, with your faith in God, you understand that no, it's just what in God's eyes is what really matters. But because I've always wanted to be that person who's dependable, who does, you know, all these things. That's my biggest fear, is not coming through, you know, is basically failing according to the expectations of others. And that's the biggest thing I struggle with. And that's why about it seems like every other week I want to, quit the business and go get some different job. Because that's what I worry about. I worry about I'm going to fail, I'm going to fail my employees, the customers who rely on our business for whatever, that we're not going to provide the service that I feel like we should, whatever reason. That is literally my biggest fear.
So let me come at it from an educator standpoint, right? We talk a lot these days about growth mindset, and one of those cute teacher acronyms that you might see on a bulletin board in a classroom is FAIL, stands for first attempt in learning.
Yeah.
Do you buy that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, failure is good. I mean, and the other saying that kind of goes along with that is every failure is simply a lesson in how not to do something.
Right. Or fail fast, fail cheap, fail forward, all of these things, right?
Yeah. And that's truly what it is. I mean, we come to this life imperfect, and we have to fail. We have to make mistakes. We have to do things like that in order to learn. And so it makes sense that would be an education,
So I'm even thinking of upon this rock I'll build my church, right? Simon Peter, walking on the water, the storm gets scary, he starts to sink. That's a pretty epic fail.
Yeah.
And probably one of the great epic fails in scriptures, right?
Yeah.
Like he sinks and immediately he's saved. And then fast forward to the end of the Savior's mortal life, and Peter weeps bitterly at denying the Savior 3 times.
Yeah.
And yet in the end, well, and actually probably the third one, right? Where he's gone a fishing after Jesus Christ was crucified.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, I'm going back to my boat and I'm going to go fishing.
Yep.
And the resurrected Savior comes and eats with them and says, do you love these more than me?
Right.
Like, why are we on this beach, Peter? And I think, and eventually he does become that rock upon which the Lord, that cornerstone, Jesus Christ, the cornerstone, and the apostles, Peter being one of them and chief among them. I just find that's fascinating that you are not the first person to come on our program and say that that's their fear.
Yeah.
But we fear the very thing that might actually
be good for us.
Help us become who he wants us to become, right?
Well, and that goes back to, thinking that you're not enough. I know for me, when I look at other people, a lot of times I'm very forgiving of other people's failures, but I'm not as forgiving of my own failures, or my own weaknesses. And so I think sometimes you have to battle that. You have to say, look, if I'm going to forgive other people's failures, I need to forgive my own too. And I do, I think, but it is definitely a struggle sometimes, kind of holding yourself to a higher standard. And you're right, when you look at people like Peter, who obviously was a great person, he had his own struggles, he had his own failures, he had his own weaknesses. And yet, Jesus Christ was able to use him. He was an instrument for Jesus Christ. So, it gives all of us hope, that we can be instruments as well, despite our own weaknesses. So
we talked before you got on the program about a little bit about that setback and the power of story. And I shared that I think the most powerful, the most important story that we all carry with us is how we know who Jesus is.
Yeah.
So Brent, how do you know who Jesus is?
Oh, That's a good question. I mean, I think I've had some moments in my life. I mean, where you have a significant moment where you get that revelation that really hits you like a ton of bricks. I've had those. I've had a few of those where, but those only come when you're when you're bearing testimony of Jesus Christ or you're speaking about Jesus Christ, and that's when those come. And so I definitely, but the other thing too, that Jesus Christ taught that in order to know me, you have to do you have to follow my example, right? You have to follow me. And so, a lot of my testimony has come by experimenting upon some of the things that Jesus taught that we should do. And as I do those things, and I realize this is really good, like this is a good way to be, this is a good, thing to do. I gain a greater testimony of who Jesus Christ is, and that He's real. That He is alive and my Savior and still there. So,
Brent, what gives you hope these days?
Yeah. Well, I try not to watch the news.
Yeah. Smart.
Just too much bad news. Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, there's definitely times in life where you feel like you're low on hope. When you go through some of these times of struggle, where we talked at the beginning of the show, like when you go through a hard time and you just can't see out of it, but I think, obviously my faith and my testimony in Jesus Christ give me hope, but and a hope that there's something greater and better after this life. This life is full of struggle. It's full of afflictions and difficulties. But one of the things that my wife has taught me is that you can also find joy in this life. I mean, I'm sure you guys are familiar with Corrie ten Boom and her book,
Hiding Place.
Hiding Place. And one of the just amazing things about her was how she talked about when they were in the concentration camp and how she was grateful for lice, right? Because all the lice in where she was sleeping kept the guards away, right? So that the Nazi guards wouldn't come to that part of the building because of all the lice. And so she found a way to be grateful for something that most people are like, what are you crazy? We hate these lice, And one thing that my wife is good at is having hope. She's a super hopeful person. And so she's constantly talking about find the joy, find happiness, even in the tough things, even in the difficult times. Find that light, find those lights, and think of what's great about them. And so I think there is. I see, and again, going back to, this is going to shape who I am, and it's kind of like going into the weight room. You're not gonna get on the bench and be like, I'm not gonna put any weight on because I don't want to hurt. You have to have pain in order. No pain, no gain, right? It's an absolutely true statement. It's true in life too.
I love that story of Corrie ten Boom, and I think to myself, how would I react?
Right.
How would I like? I love that, but that almost feels like Hollywood movie, you
It
know.
does.
And I'm not. Of course, Corey Ten Boom's story is an amazing story of faith, and I think of that, and I'm thinking, there's no way I would respond like that. And I just wonder sometimes, how strong am I? How strong will I be? You know, and it really to kind of go full circle. You know, Brent, you started with describing yourself as extraordinarily ordinary.
Yes.
And the second you said that, it made me think of something that Russell M. Nelson said in the last general conference, and I'm just going to share it with you. And you know,
Yeah.
maybe it's an invitation for all of us to reflect. He says, in like manner, it is now time that we each implement extraordinary measures, perhaps measures we've never taken before, to strengthen our personal spiritual foundations. Unprecedented times call for unprecedented measures. My dear brothers and sisters, these are the latter days. If you and I are to withstand the forthcoming perils and pressures, think about that.
Yeah.
Right? Think about that. What is he seeing? It is imperative that we each have a firm spiritual foundation upon the rock of our Redeemer, Jesus Christ. So I ask each of you, how firm is your foundation? And what reinforcements to your testimony and understanding of the gospel are needed? And, you know, I love that extraordinarily ordinary. Our prophet is saying, what extraordinary or extraordinary measures can we put in practice to firm up those foundations? Because peril's coming, pressure's coming, right? It's just like young Brent House in the 7-Eleven with VHS, you know, and here we are 40, 50 years old, and those pressures are still there. Our prophet is saying the pressures will increase. And without something extraordinary that we're not usually doing, we won't have the foundation. So something to think about.
Yeah. And I think you have to do, this is the thing about life, is that you have to pay attention to the small things. And if you don't make good decisions on all your small things that come across your way, you're not going to make good decisions on the big things, you know. And that's you know, being extraordinarily ordinary. I think that's kind of what I kind of feel like. I do a lot of small things, you know. I make a lot of small decisions, but those small things shape you. They are who you become, you know. Little by little.
Yeah, as you said though, like if we don't do those little things, we won't do the big things. At the same time, if there are little things we are doing that we shouldn't be doing,
exactly,
in our mind we say that's a little thing. You know, I think of Tyler, one of our favorite things to talk about on this program is just that invitation to remove old debris. Yeah. And I don't know if you guys have heard the news story about the space junk that's out there. And you've got a space station floating around, orbiting around the Earth every 90 minutes, and it's running into this junk. And this junk is posing safety hazards. And I think the second I heard that, I thought of like old debris in our life.
Yep.
And how if it's not cleared out, eventually, cyclically, it does get in the way, right? And things come up.
Yeah, so. And I think that is the invitation. The invitation is look at, you know, and I don't think it's saying look at the big things. He's saying look at the little things, you know.
Yeah, so the Freeman family's pondering that right now. We're pondering that exact quote, and we're asking, what extraordinary things can we do? You know, like if you're not used to praying in the morning, pray in the morning. If you're not used to praying on your knees, maybe pray on your knees.
Yeah,
if you're not used to reading the Book of Mormon, right?
Yeah.
It's not crazy right now what he's asking us to do. It's just maybe something we haven't done before. Because again, if you continue to do what you always do, you're going to get what you always get. And he's saying what we always get will not be enough. And it's not the first time he said that, right? He's talked about spiritually surviving. We're not going to be able to spiritually survive unless we increase our capacity to receive personal revelation, similar to some of the things that we talked about tonight. So
yeah, I definitely like that. Yeah.
So Dr. Brent House, we've been spending some time with you. I appreciate the lessons and letting us in on your life. I appreciate who you are, and you are enough, brother.
Yeah, thank you.
You're enough. I don't need to sing you a song to let you know that you're enough, right?
That's right.
Well, we love the example of George Bailey and George Bailey's journey in the movie It's a Wonderful Life, and we're coming up on that most wonderful time of the year where we'll get an opportunity to revisit Bedford Falls and the life of George Bailey. But George Bailey learns the hard way that his life was wonderful and that he was enough. And he's toasted at the end by his little brother, and he's toasted as the richest man in town. And Tyler and I love it. We love the irony of that statement, because at that time, George Bailey is a house of cards, right? Yes. George Bailey's life was not so rosy. So as we think about your life, and as you sit where you sit at the ripe old age of 50 years old, looking back, Brent, what does it mean to you to be considered the richest man in town?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, I spoke earlier on in the show about my wife and kids and my family, my parents, my siblings. Just having those important relationships are probably, not, one of the greatest parts of my life that make me rich. But I think that also my relationship with God, is that, I'm trying to strengthen that. I'm trying to become a better person according to what He wants me to become. And I look about, I haven't really said anything in this show about my experience in the United States Navy, but I do have people that will ask me, because I got out at about 11 years, didn't get retirement from it. People will ask me, do you regret being in the Navy? And I always say, absolutely not. I had some fabulous experiences in the Navy. I had some great role models. My first boss, Captain Tom Ritchie, was like one of the most gentle, Christ-like people you would meet. And a lot of my friends, a lot of people that I knew there, Billy Pimentel and Sally Service and some other people, were just so good. And so we talk about family, but also relationships. We're going to take that with us into the next life. And I feel like that makes us rich as well. And I was super happy when Tyler called and asked me to be on the show. And I certainly, value our friendship, our relationship that we have. And so those relationships with family, well, number one, with God, with family, and with friends, I think that, and again, because that is God's currency, is people. And so all those relationships that I have with so many great people, that's what makes me feel like I'm, one of the richest men in town.
Brent, think about that. I love that answer, because if you think about the things we spend precious life chasing, and how much of what we're chasing won't come with us.
Yeah.
We can have people, but if we have people with empty relationships, there's no richness there.
No.
The richness is in the relationship, because like you just said, that's what we take. That's the only thing we take.
That's it. I love it. Brent, it's been awesome, man. I am grateful for you sacrificing some time to come on with us tonight. I'm grateful for our relationship, man. I'm grateful for our friendship. I'm grateful for who you are. That's the great thing, right? We have these interactions, we create relationships, and there are things that when I'm presented with certain situations, this is the honest truth. Sometimes I think, what would Brent do right here?
What would Brent say?
What would Brent say? And I appreciate that. So I'm grateful for you sharing some of those things tonight, and I just appreciate you, love you, and love your family a ton.
Thank you. Yeah, I love you too. And this is cool because, this is not a sacrifice of time because, I strengthened my relationship with you. I now have a new friend in Mike. I mean, that's the cool thing. That's what makes life worth it. I would easily spend this kind of time. What else would I do with it? Am I going to go make more money? Am I going to go? It doesn't.
Can't take it with you. Can't take it with you,
man. This is going with us. This is going with us.
It is.
Man.
Yep.
It is. Wow.
And Brent, I feel some gratitude for people I just don't know. Obviously, I'm getting to know you, but I just feel so grateful for those people you honored in our time together, for helping. Along the way, these people come and they make an impression on you, and we get to enjoy the product the life that's before us. But for your parents and for their example. And this parenting thing is not easy. No. And, I just think of your ability to stay true to the faith of your parents and let it work in you and let it grow. And I just love the idea of you making choices along the way and hearing some answers from God, indicating that there's some things for you to learn, and jumping into that with 2 feet, just like, all right, let's go. I think that's fantastic. And I do think we judge others at their best and ourselves at our worst. And I love the fact that you shared this sense of inadequacy, but everywhere along the line I see sufficiency. I see adequate,
right, Mike? And the idea of extraordinarily ordinary, I just see extraordinary.
Yeah, I mean,
that's the thing. That's the cool thing.
Because in the end, everything that is excellent in the little things.
Yeah, that's it.
Very rarely do we look at something and say, "Wow, that's excellent," and they are completely ignoring those ordinary things. Right? Yeah. That's the secret sauce. So, boom, Brent House on Richest Man in Town, giving away secrets to the universe.
Yeah, that's it. Now, hey, mission accomplished.
And he's a scientist, so they're legit.
Yeah, there's a ton of credibility in this episode. So, Brent, we do appreciate you. Thanks so much. Tell your family that we're grateful for them, and thanks for sacrificing their time with you tonight. And we'll do this again soon sometime.
Keep going, man. One step at a time.
Have a good night.
Good idea, Ernie. A toast to my big brother George, the richest man in town.